Hi, this is Renaud Anjoran at Agilian. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. That's what they say. For example, when you build a house, would you forget to first build the foundations? The house is not going to last for very long, right? So when you develop a new electronic product, same thing. There's certain steps, certain validations that you don't want to skip. There's a process for that. It's called the new product introduction process. Let me walk you through it.
Hi, this is Renaud Anjoran from Agilian. In this video, I'm going to explain how the new product introduction process works. And this is applied to innovative electromechanical products. Just a few words about myself. I've been in industrialization and manufacturing for about 20 years as a service provider, a consultant, now working at Agilian, our contract manufacturing company. My background has been mostly about quality and reliability. And I've been advising dozens of startups through these accelerators or startup support groups. Right, and this is the various activities of our group, the Sophie's group, from manufacturing in China, in India, design development, testing, and so on. We cover a lot of ground. So let's go into the topic. What is the NPI process? The key idea in my mind is that there are gates, and you go from phase to phase, and every time before you graduate, let's say, to the next phase, you need to go through certain validations. Okay, I will go through that, but hardware is very unforgiving. If you go from one phase to the next prematurely, you might have to go back, do a lot of rework, and you will have wasted a lot of time and a lot of money. Okay, so that's why companies that gain experience here have a process to follow. Okay, so what is this process? This is another way of looking at it from phase 1 to phase 6. This is the way that we call it, right? Different companies have different names. However, here, and especially as you get close to mass production, you will notice that, especially in the electronics industry, engineering validation testing, design validation testing, production validation testing, these kind of acronyms, EVT, DVT, PVT, will pop up very often. And that's why we also refer to them, because, well, they make a lot of sense. Okay, but without boring you and looking into the details of this graph, I think we should first break it down. There's two big phases. Okay, actually, the first three phases are about the engineering of the product. Okay, the design of the product, picking the components, deciding on the construction, and so on and so forth. And then after that, at some point, you see there's a transition. The product design gets frozen, and then this is more about managing for smooth operations and following. There's really some kind of playbook here, right? Whereas here, it's a bit messy. There's a lot of problem solving and exploring different avenues, right? Very, very different between this first half and the second half. The approach is quite different. Now let's look at these 6 phases one by one. And the design team needs to have a documented list of requirements for the product. Okay, and then here we like to call it feasibility study, because there's a lot of exploration. What are the big decisions, the key materials, key components, etc.? What is the design architecture going to be? Do these requirements together actually even make sense? Let's refine the requirements, but what the product is supposed to do. For example, if the product is on a battery, but it needs to communicate a lot of data with Wi-Fi, but the battery needs to last for 3 months. I mean, it might not actually be possible. So a little bit of theoretical calculation will show what is probably possible, right? So things get refined. Here, as the key components are picked, initial cost estimates can usually be prepared. In parallel, also renderings for industrial design, very important. If the look and feel of the product, it needs to be nice, right? Sometimes proof of concept prototypes are necessary here. And of course, a bit of risk analysis. Okay. I want to double click on a few topics here. First is that some people tell us the product just needs to be perfect. And they say, well, Apple does that. So how about you can do this, right? And it's really not the right way to think about it. Okay, if you have the time and the budget and all the support systems of Apple, why not? But otherwise, you need to be realistic. Okay, don't start from this point. And another very important topic is that the requirements for the product need to be specific and they need to be measurable. Okay, so if people say, oh, it needs to be sturdy, it needs to be resistant. Okay, how will we know if this is the case? Once you have a prototype, it needs to be measurable, it needs to be testable. For example, a drop test, blah, 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 blah. Okay, it can be many different things. So that's why we included different examples here. But it really needs to be specific, and this will be verified at some point in the development of the product by measuring or by testing prototypes, right? So it's very important. And if we zoom back a little bit, the feasibility study basically takes the product requirements and gives us a clear plan for a real product that is actually feasible. Okay. If you skip that and you go into the details of the work too early, you miss on some big issues, and also you miss on thinking of alternative options and taking a step back and really thinking of how maybe the product could be better, right? There's also a lot of work on the sales and marketing side, or customer development side, we like to call it. But obviously, this presentation is only about the technical topic. Okay, version 1.0 should not be extremely complicated if you are a startup without a lot of cash and a lot of time. You need to think of maybe what would a simple and lovable product or simple and lovable concept, what would it be, right? And if you have some other ideas, maybe that should be your version 2, right? You need to be realistic, basically. And finally, industrial design, you need to think, do we want something just looks nice, or something that really has its own personality, or something that is really quite different and tries to push the boundaries of what is possible, right? Very, very different implications for the industrial designers at this stage. Okay, now let's look at this phase number 2, the prototyping builds. And this is what people tend to think of. Okay, oh, we do the design of the product. Well, basically, we do the design, we buy parts and 3D print parts, etc. Then we assemble them and we see how they work and so on. And basically, you need to think of it as several iterations, typically several iterations of prototyping, of design and prototyping iterations. Okay? And every time the prototypes help you confirm that some of the documents are verified. Okay, so we always try to circle back to the initial document about the requirement, the product requirement. Very, very important. Okay, there's also some sourcing here as you pick the components. Very important to pay attention to the requirements for reliability and for compliance. Okay, there will be some reliability critical parts, and there will be some compliance critical parts, and you need to know exactly what kind of information to ask the suppliers. So when I talk about iteration, design iteration, so plan, do the design work, build the prototype, test the prototype, maybe get the feedback, send it to the customer, show it to a few users, etc., and then go into a new iteration again and again. And there are 2 tracks, really. There's the look and feel. So starting with the industrial design, the sketches, mock-ups, it's renderings, etc., and then maybe physical look like prototype. So they might be, for example, 3D printed and painted on it. Okay, very different from the production process, maybe. Okay, and maybe in production you don't want any paint, you don't want any kind of surface treatment, but just to make it with the right aspect, right? The look and feel. Then you need to do that at this stage. And then the function, okay, you want functional prototypes. So engineering design, some proof of concept prototypes, and then some more advanced prototypes, and then the firmware gets developed, and then it all needs to be integrated, and so on and so forth, right? And at some point, that's later, not in phase 2 typically, but engineering prototypes are prepared that both look like and work like what you want. Okay. And this is phase 1, phase 2, a lot of discovery. As we go into phase 4, phase 5, it's more about fine tuning. Okay, if I really try to simplify things. So let's go into phase 3 now. As I say, this is a little bit about fine-tuning the design. We know there are some issues, but usually there's 1, 2, 3 issues to work on, okay? And there are probably only 1, 2, maybe 3 iterations of design that remain to be done. So the content of the work tends to be the same. In some cases, it makes sense to already make some tooling, okay, to start to validate certain things that otherwise cannot be validated. And one important thing here is the DFM review, Design for Manufacturing. Now, the engineers you work with should bake manufacturability in all of their design work, of course, but it is good to have a formal DFM review, at least at that phase, okay? You also need to plan, if not already done. So compliance, if we really oversimplify, you want to sell in the EU, in the USA, what you're looking at. Here you're looking at chemical restrictions, okay, for the product. Also chemical restrictions and some other requirements for the packaging. Then you look at electrical safety. Might not apply in the USA, for example. Maybe it's compulsory in Canada, or only if it's used in the workplace and so on. It's a little bit complicated. Then you look at electromagnetic compatibility, the emissions, the way the device is impacted by other EMC emissions, and RF spectrum and so on. Okay, standards are different, requirements are different. And there are often some more product-specific requirements. Okay, this is grossly oversimplified, but this already should give you a little bit of an idea about the level of complexity here when it comes to product compliance. And then there's reliability, and people very often completely forget about this one. Okay, when you source the components, you need to ensure you get some reliability test results, etc. Then you do some validation testing at different phases along the NPI process. Okay, and this needs to be planned, and it keeps going in mass production. Very often, that's a very good thing to do. Okay, so a lot of planning here. Okay, at one point we say, all right, the design can be frozen because we need to go into the next phase, and we think the risk that we need to go back to the product design is low. Okay, let's freeze the design and go into phase 4. Phase 4, we call it tooling validation, because most of the time a big part of the job is actually getting the production tooling fabricated and trialed and validated. Okay, so it means tooling is made. Okay, some parts coming off the tooling are made. There's a few different trials. Then some full prototypes are built again to be tested, and some of them can be sent, well, for some user testing. Some of them can be sent to laboratories for compliance, for reliability. There's often a need for at least 20 different samples here at this stage. Okay. There's also a lot of preparations in the background. So it's not just about the tooling shop, and then once we have parts, we run into, let's make some prototypes and so on. No, the production process needs to be developed. Quality, well, the standard needs to be documented with the acceptance criteria, a test plan, and so on and so forth. There's a lot more to this phase than just tooling. And when I talk about tooling, let me move this over here so you have an idea. This is a typical timeline and steps for plastic injection mold fabrication. Okay, from the design of the tooling, starting with the DFM analysis, purchasing the different parts and accessories, and then going through all the machining, and finally fitting it, assembling it, and then doing trials. Okay. Now, once this is done, a lot of people say, oh, we are ready. We have the production tooling, we have approved prototypes, everything. We're ready to go into mass production. High quantity, let's go for 5,000, 10,000 pieces. No, serious manufacturers never do that. It has to be gradual. Okay, so basically here we do everything just like in mass production, but on a smaller scale. Okay, in a lot of cases, it's pre-production pilot runs, 40 to 100 pieces. Really depends on the complexity, the size of the part, of the products, and so on. Okay, and a lot of process improvement in the background, okay, and focusing on quality, safety, speed, okay, and all of this is the same as mass production, okay, with close monitoring of the speed and quality, and if there are major issues, it's not ready for mass production, it should go into another pre-production pilot run. That's the basic idea here. Do not think that if the manufacturer, let's say, makes a batch of 100 pieces in pre-production, you will be able to sell these 100 pieces. If they've been reworked, there might be reliability issues. Some of them might not be able to reach the full performance that you require. Okay, this is normal. That's why things are done on a small scale, because the risk is high. A very important concept also is that from batch to batch, there is variation, okay? And this, let's say this is your tolerance limits, and maybe you do one batch, and especially the custom design parts, right? Oh, they come back and everything is very nice on target, nothing outside of tolerance, and it assembles really well, it functions really well, very nice. Well, maybe the next batch is going to be different and a bunch of parts will be out of tolerance. What is the impact on that? So if you do just one pre-production pilot run and you assume everything is fine, you might be in this case or in this case. Here you're happy because you keep doing the other batches, everything is good because you have a stable process that's always within tolerance. Here you run into a problem. You have a lot of variation. So here you get lucky, here you get lucky, but in the meantime, you might have some other issues, right? So that's why going very fast into high quantities is dangerous. It should be a series of batches as you go through your pre-production phase, but also as you ramp up once you are in mass production. Okay, so yeah, same idea here. Okay, you need to think about all the batches. Okay, phase 6, as you guess, is once you're in mass production and you basically ramp up. So you need to work with the manufacturer, their process engineers, quality engineers, maybe automation and maintenance engineers, and so on, all working on improving the process, right? Easier, better, faster, cheaper. Very important to keep working on that. And over time, it grows in maturity. The first time, let's say they do 50 pieces and 80 pieces in pre-production, then they go and they make 1,000 pieces. And after that, maybe 3,000 pieces and 10,000 pieces. Okay, when they make 1,000 pieces, that first mass production batch might not be very good, right? There might still be 5% or even more of the products that have to get reworked somewhere in the process, for example, right? They might be spending more hours than they should to hit their targets. Maybe they're losing money. Okay, so you need to be aware of that. Things get better over time as the manufacturer is gaining experience. Oh, now cumulatively we've made 1,000 pieces. It's quite different from cumulatively we've made 100,000 pieces. The level of maturity is very, very different. And yeah, we can work all along we work with some projects that arrive around here when everything is nearly frozen, and we do the DFM review and some adjustments, and then we go straight into tooling validation and so on. We get some production transfers that arrive somewhere here pre-production, because we need to go through this phase anyway again to validate the process, but maybe all the tooling is done and can be validated quickly. And we get some other projects that are earlier on this graph. All right, let us know if you have any questions, and yeah, looking forward to talking to you soon.